My sister got pregnant by my husband, and my entire family had known for 3 months before anyone bothered to tell me. They didn't warn me. They didn't pull me aside. They sat at Sunday dinners, and passed the mashed potatoes, and let me think my marriage was fine, while they were already planning how to manage the fallout. My mother, my father, my own grandmother. They held a quiet little committee behind my back, deciding what I could handle, and when I deserved to know it. Their conclusion when I finally found out, was that I needed to forgive. Because family is family. Because my sister was scared. Because my husband had made a mistake, and mistakes happen. And what good would blowing everything up actually do? So I gave them exactly what they'd earned. Not a screaming match in my mother's kitchen. Not a custody battle played out for an audience. I left, quietly, completely, and without a single word of explanation. And 4 years later, I hear they still don't know where I am. My name is Dana. I was 31 when my world came apart. And I want to tell you it happened all at once. In one terrible night. But that's not true. It happened in pieces over months. While I was too busy living my actual life to notice the ground shifting under it. I worked as a logistics manager for a regional trucking company outside of Columbus, Ohio. The kind of job that sounds boring until you realize you're the person who has to know where 600 trailers are at any given moment, and what to do when a snowstorm in Indiana throws all of them off schedule at once. I was good at it. I liked the kind of good I was at it. Methodical, unbothered. The person other people called when something fell apart. Because I didn't fall apart with it. I didn't know yet that those same qualities would end up being the only reason I survived what came next. My husband's name was Marcus. We'd been married 6 years, together for 9. Since we met at Ohio State during an econ class, neither of us actually cared about. He sold commercial insurance, the kind of job where charm matters more than product knowledge, and Marcus had charm in a quantity that used to make me feel lucky. He remembered things. Anniversaries, the names of my coworkers' kids, the fact that I liked my coffee with exactly 1 sugar and not 2. I used to tell people he was thoughtful in a way most men weren't. Now I understand that noticing details and caring about people are not the same skill. And Marcus had only ever mastered one of them. My younger sister Holly was 3 years behind me. And growing up she'd always been the one things came easy to. Prettier in that effortless way, funnier at parties. The one my mother introduced first when we walked into a room together. I never resented her for it, not really. I loved her. She was maid of honor at my wedding. She gave a toast that made the whole reception cry, including me. She worked as a dental hygienist in the same town we grew up in, 20 minutes from our parents. And for years, she'd call me on Sunday nights just to talk about nothing. Her dating life, her landlord, whatever true crime show she was binging. I used to look forward to those calls. That was the life I thought I had. Until the week everything cracked open. Which started, of all things, with a dead phone battery. I'd been in Indianapolis for 4 days running disaster logistics. After that ice storm knocked out half our delivery routes, across 3 states. 16-hour days, hotel coffee, a phone that never stopped buzzing with dispatch updates. My charger had died on day 2 and I'd been borrowing one from a coworker. Plugging in only when I remembered, which meant my phone spent most of those 4 days dark. Marcus knew I was slammed. He'd texted twice, light stuff, hope you're surviving, miss you, the normal noise of a marriage running on autopilot. I didn't think anything of it. We wrapped up a day early. I caught an earlier flight home instead of texting ahead, mostly because I wanted to surprise him. Maybe cook something that wasn't gas station food. Fall asleep in my own bed for once. I remember standing in our driveway with my suitcase. Feeling almost giddy about it. The kind of small domestic happiness you don't appreciate until you look back. And realize it was the last hour you had it. The house was quiet when I came in. But Holly's car was in the driveway. Which wasn't unusual. She came by all the time. Sometimes to drop off something for Marcus's birthday she was planning. Sometimes just to use our pool in the summer. I called out, no answer. I went upstairs assuming maybe they were in the backyard. And that's when I heard voices through our bedroom door. Low. The kind of low people use when they think no one's listening. I didn't open the door right away. I want to be honest about that. Because there's a version of this story where I burst in. Immediately. Dramatic, righteous, and that's not what happened. I stood in the hallway for almost a full minute. Hand on the frame. Listening to my husband's voice say something I couldn't make out. And my sister laugh, soft. The way you laugh with someone you're comfortable with. And then I heard her say clear as anything. We have to tell her eventually, Marcus. I'm not doing this for 9 months. I opened the door. I'm not going to walk you through every detail of what I saw, because some things don't need narrating, you can feel it in yourself. What I'll tell you is that my sister was 4 months pregnant. She'd been showing for weeks, hiding it under loose sweaters, and a story about a new gym routine that bloated her stomach, which I'd believed because why wouldn't I believe my own sister? Marcus's face did something I'd never seen it do before, which was nothing. No panic, no scrambling explanation. Just this flat, exhausted resignation, like a man who'd been waiting a long time for a bill to come due, and was almost relieved it finally had. I left the house. I didn't yell. I drove to a Holiday Inn off the highway, and sat on the edge of a bed that smelled like industrial detergent. And didn't cry for almost 2 hours. Because I think some part of me was still doing math. Trying to figure out how long this had been going on. Counting backward through every Sunday dinner, every pool day, every time Holly had stayed late. Helping Marcus with something, while I worked a double. What came after was worse than the discovery itself. And, this is the part I think people don't expect when they hear a story like mine. The affair wasn't the thing that broke me. It was what happened over the following month. When I realized my entire family had known. My mother admitted it first, almost by accident during a phone call, where she was trying to convince me to hear Holly out. She said something like, "We've known for a while, honey, and we just didn't know how to tell you." And I had to ask her to repeat it. Because I genuinely thought I'd misheard. She hadn't known for a week. She'd known since Holly first suspected she might be pregnant, back before Christmas. 3 months before I found out standing in my own bedroom doorway. My father had known. My grandmother, who still sent me birthday cards with $5 bills, folded inside like I was 12, had known and had apparently told my mother that these things happen in families. And that the important thing was keeping everyone together. Nobody warned me. Nobody pulled me aside at Thanksgiving, or called me on one of those Sunday nights, or said one true sentence to me in 3 solid months. While I went on believing I had a sister, who loved me, and a husband who was tired but faithful. They'd had family meetings about it. My aunt later let it slip, that there'd been an actual sit-down at my parents' house, the 4 of them around the kitchen table, discussing what to do. Like my marriage was a logistics problem, to be managed, rather than a life that belonged to me. Their solution, once I knew and was no longer useful to manage quietly, was forgiveness. That word got used so many times in those weeks, I started to hate the shape of it in my mouth. Holly was scared, they said. She was young, she'd made a terrible mistake, and didn't I know how hard it must have been for her, carrying this secret, this baby. Marcus had been weak, not evil, and wasn't weakness something you could work through in a marriage, given time. My mother actually said the words, "Think about the baby," to me. As if the baby's existence was something I had caused by leaving, rather than something Marcus and Holly had caused by choosing each other behind my back for months. My father called me selfish. Those were his words. He said walking away from my marriage and my family over what he called a mistake was selfish. That I was punishing innocent people. Meaning Holly, meaning the baby, meaning apparently everyone except me. He said family weathers things. He said his own brother had cheated with his sister-in-law, decades ago before I was born. And that the family had survived it. That everyone had moved past it. And didn't I want to be the bigger person? I asked him, very calmly, if he'd known about that affair when it happened or only after. He went quiet. I already knew the answer. There was a pattern in my family, I was only now seeing clearly. Something passed down like a piece of bad furniture. Nobody wanted to admit was ugly. The idea that loyalty to the family unit mattered more than honesty with the people inside it. My grandmother's silence about my father's brother. Decades ago wasn't an isolated kindness. It was a blueprint. And I was watching them apply it to me in real time. I went back to the house exactly once, on a Tuesday, while Marcus was at work, to get clothes and my laptop and the box of my grandfather's letters that I cared about more than anything else in that house. Holly was there. I don't know if that was coincidence, or if she'd been told I was coming and wanted to talk. She tried. She stood in the kitchen doorway with her hand resting on her stomach, in a way that made something in my chest go cold, and she said she was sorry, that it had happened slowly, that she hadn't meant for any of it, that she still loved me, that she too some say I could understand. I asked her one question. I asked her how long she'd known I was working that disaster shift in Indianapolis, completely unreachable. Before she decided, that was the week to come over. She didn't answer that one. She just said my name soft, like she used to say it when we were kids, and she wanted me to forgive her for something small, a broken toy, a borrowed sweater ruined. I left without taking the letters. I went back for them later, when she wasn't there. I want to tell you that I made some grand declaration in that kitchen. She said something so cutting it became a story. People told for years. I didn't. I just turned around and walked out, and I think that silence scared her more than anything I could have said, because Holly had spent her whole life, able to talk her way back into people's good graces, and for the first time, I wasn't giving her the chance. The divorce took 4 months, which in hindsight, I handled with a precision that surprised even me. Ohio is an equitable distribution state, not pure 50-50, and I'd kept meticulous records throughout our marriage without ever consciously planning for this. Every account, every asset, who'd contributed what, all the boring spreadsheet habits that made me good at my job, turned out to make me dangerous in a divorce. Marcus had assumed, I think, that I'd be too devastated to fight for anything, that grief would make me sloppy. It didn't. I hired a lawyer outside our usual social circle. Someone Marcus's firm had never worked with. And I came to every meeting prepared in a way that visibly unsettled him. I kept the house, since it had been purchased with money from my grandfather's inheritance before the marriage. Clearly documented. Clearly mine. I took half of everything else that qualified as marital property, including his half of a small rental property we'd bought together in Dayton, which he'd assumed I'd let go out of exhaustion. I didn't let it go. I made him buy out my share at fair market value instead of taking a discount, because I had nothing left to lose by being difficult. And difficult, it turned out, suited me. He tried, near the end, to make it about Holly's baby. His lawyer floated the idea that I should be reasonable, given the circumstances, that a contentious divorce would be hard on a pregnant woman in the family. I remember sitting in that mediation room, and feeling something settle into place inside me. Cold and clear. I said I had no relationship to that baby, and no obligation to consider its comfort in the division of my own assets. The room went quiet. My lawyer, a sharp no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who I will be grateful to for the rest of my life, didn't say a word, just let the silence do its work. I sold the house within 6 weeks of the divorce being finalized. Not because I needed to. I could have stayed. But because every room in it had a memory I didn't want anymore. And because staying would have meant staying reachable, staying findable, staying exactly where my family expected me to be, quietly grieving where they could keep an eye on me, and wait for me to come around. I didn't come around. I requested a transfer through my company to a regional hub, outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. 600 miles from everyone I'd grown up with. I changed my cell number, and didn't give the new one to my parents, my grandmother, or anyone who still spoke to Holly. I kept my email for work only, and created a new personal one that none of them had. I told my closest coworker, the only person who knew the full story, that if anyone ever called the office asking for me by my maiden name, she should say I no longer worked there, even after I did. For the first year they tried. My mother sent letters to my old address, that the new owners, a kind retired couple, were good enough to forward to a P.O. box I'd set up. And checked only once a month. The letters all said variations of the same thing. That the baby was born, that he was beautiful, that surely now, with a real child in the world, I could find it in my heart to be part of the family again. My father wrote once, only once, a stiff and formal letter that read more like a business memo than anything from a parent, listing reasons I owed the family my presence. I read it standing at my mailbox, and then I put it in the recycling without writing back. The hardest one was from Holly, about 14 months after I left. She wrote about the baby, a boy she'd named after our grandfather, which felt like a small specific cruelty, even though I don't think she meant it that way. She wrote that Marcus was good with him, that they'd gotten married quietly the year before, no ceremony, just a courthouse and lunch after. She wrote that she thought about me every day, and that not having me in her son's life felt like a wound that never closed. She asked if I'd at least call, just once, just to hear my voice. I didn't call. I sat with that letter for a long time. Long enough that the part of me that used to be a sister ached, in a way I hadn't let it ache in over a year. And then I folded it back into its envelope. And put it in a drawer with the others, because feeling the ache wasn't the same as deciding to walk back into the fire that caused it. I built a life in Charlotte that had nothing borrowed from the one before it. I made friends through a hiking group. Ordinary people who knew me only as Dana, the logistics manager, who was good at her job and quiet about her past. And who never asked too many questions, because I never gave them an opening to. I dated eventually, a contractor named Theo who renovated old houses, and didn't push when I told him early on that my family's situation was complicated, and I'd rather not get into it. 3 years in, I bought a small house with a backyard, big enough for the garden I'd never had time for back in Ohio, paid for entirely with money that was unquestionably, unshakably mine. About 8 months ago, my old coworker forwarded me an email that had come into the office from my father, asking if anyone knew how to reach me, because my grandmother was sick. Not dying, sick, vague enough that I understood it as exactly what it was. A hook designed to catch whatever guilt might still be hanging in me, waiting to be reeled back in. I didn't respond. 2 months after that, another letter came to the P.O. box. This one from my mother, saying my grandmother had passed, and that the funeral would be held on a specific date. And that the family hoped I would come. That this was bigger than whatever had happened between Holly and me. That some things mattered more than old wounds. I thought about it for 3 days. Not about going. I knew before I finished reading the letter that I wasn't going to walk back into that town, into that church, into a room full of people who'd spent months deciding what truths I deserved to know, and when. I thought about what, if anything, I wanted to send back in response, after a silence that by then had lasted nearly 4 years. I wrote one sentence. I told them my condolences for their loss, and that they should understand my absence as exactly what it had always been. Since the day I drove away from that house without a single piece of furniture or a single explanation. Not punishment, not grief I hadn't processed. But a closed door. Permanently. By choice. Mine. I never sent it. I realized, halfway through addressing the envelope, that explaining myself to them one more time would just be one more thing they got to have from me. One more piece of my attention they hadn't earned. So I put the letter in the same drawer as Holly's, unsent, and I went outside and worked in my garden until the sun went down, the way I do most evenings now, in a life none of them know anything about. In a town none of them could find me in. Married, as far as I'm concerned. Only to the version of myself I built back up from nothing. Piece by careful piece. The same way I'd build anything that needed to last.